ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. So Rishi and I were having a conversation, and he said, it's been 4 years since you came to Grand Rapids, and he asked me, he goes, do you think you could do a meditation event over here? And typically we're used to about 10,000 people at these meditation events. And I said, I'd love to come to Grand Rapids because I know their hearts are very big and they're very pure. And as I travel across America and Canada especially, the world's changed in the last 4 or 5 years. In my opinion, it's opportunity. It's a chance to go ahead and start a conversation. If you talked to me when I was younger, I would have been happy to be recognized for everything, but the one conversation I probably would have never wanted to have was about my faith. I didn't find it appropriate. I didn't think my faith had anything to do with who I was per se, and I found it as a very private thing, although it was displayed very publicly. And interestingly enough, as I've kind of, especially in the last year or so, as I've gone from city to city across North America, times have changed and conversations need to be had. And they need to be had because I think the question of what it means to be American has gone ahead and begun to resonate with everyone again. Fundamentally, my father taught me when I was a kid growing up that you're American first and Sikh second. And the reason why he told me I was American first was he goes, the First Amendment gives you the ability to choose your religion. It's not the religion of anyone else's choice. It's not a religion that someone else gets to pick and choose. It gives me the ability to choose the way I want to worship. Unfortunately, because people make these private decisions about how they choose to worship, we seem to find a society today which somehow goes ahead and begins to judge that decision. I don't know if it was there when I was a kid. I don't know if it was there 5 years ago, but it seems to be more prevalent, and maybe it's just a little bit more vocal. For me, again, that's opportunity. It's opportunity for us to sit down and as a community and start opening up. And even 5 years ago, I don't think I would have been open enough to go ahead and say, I'm willing to have a conversation and open up our house of worship and sit here and be willing to be judged by others. And as we've kind of gone ahead and had these conversations, one thing that frequently comes up, and maybe you've seen someone with a turban, maybe if you look in the mirror, you're that person today, right? Please take a selfie, post it on your social media, right? Hashtag Sikh, okay? The most important thing is this, and it really comes down to this. Maybe you saw someone with a turban and you just kind of ignored it. Today, you will know they are a Sikh. And you will share with someone what it means to be a Sikh. And I'm not here to give you the Wikipedia version of Sikhism today. I'm here to give you the NPR deep dive PBS version of what it means to be a Sikh. Okay? And the reason why that deep immersion is so important is because what I found is our own Sikhs sometimes have trouble with knowing what it means to be a Sikh. Rishi was kind enough to go ahead and share that about his own ignorance growing up. But we have real issues in our community about language, where we fit into society, what we want for the next generation, preservation of culture versus religion. And in reality, that's an American story. One thing that, I'm constantly fascinated with, what populations immigrated in what particular areas. For example, everyone knows Grand Rapids is famously Dutch Christian. It's because people from the Netherlands ended up by immigrating to this part of Michigan. Now, in California, in the late 1800s, there were a lot of Sikhs who immigrated there. And really, if you look at the story of the West Coast, especially across Canada and California, it really is a story of immigrants. And it's not a story of immigrants anymore in the way that we think about it, but we'd like to reframe the narrative to be a story of pioneers. Sikhs have been pioneers. Sikhs have given their life for democracy. Sikhs have given our life for America, Australia, Canada, Malaysia, all the countries that we've gone ahead and lived in, Sikhs have made a sacrifice to participate and belong there. So today we're in what we call a Gurdwara. A Gurdwara means the door of the Guru. And one thing we want to talk about is what it means to be a Sikh and what it means to be a teacher. And it is a fundamental, especially for the educators, an important relationship. In India, the highest job you can have is as a teacher. The reason why is without an education, you can't have a livelihood. And in the old days, the teachers chose the students didn't pay to get taught by the teachers. Now it's a fundamental different business model. When the teachers choose the students, then they know who they're going to groom, and they have pride and dignity in who their students are. Today, if you came to learn about what's in Guru Granth Sahib, I have news for you, you're a Sikh. And a Sikh means to be a student. It comes to go ahead and be a learner. That's why when I say, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, I'm bowing before you. I'm recognizing your divinity. I know you are Sikh just as I'm a Sikh. So today, we come to each other as Sikhs. What should Sikhs discuss? Sikhs should discuss, who am I? Where have I come from? Tell me something about my maker. So I'm going to go through some frequently asked questions people ask me, just so you can kind of, maybe you had the same questions when you came into the Gurdwara, and we'll just go through it. So one of the reasons why we cover our head is Sikhs believe this body is a temple of God. But a Sikh is not the body. A Sikh is not the soul. A Sikh is the mind. And just as the body is a temple for God, the mind has a temple. And this mind temple lives in the Calvary. And the reason why we cover the Calvary, the top of our heads, is basically to remind ourselves when in the old days when something was sacred, when you wanted to go ahead and preserve the purity of something, you covered it. And one of the reasons why we cover the head is to remind ourselves each and every day about the purity of our mind and to remember to go ahead and preserve that purity. Another thing you might ask is, why do we bow in front of Sri Guru Granth Sahib? One of the reasons why we bow in front of Sri Guru Granth Sahib is it is a contract with our Satguru. Satguru means the true Guru. It's a contract. We put our mat, and mat basically means your forehead, and mat also means the way that you think. The way that we think, we are going to go ahead and accept that we're going to accept the Guru's way of thinking. We're not going to use our own way of thinking. It doesn't mean we're not going to use our critical thinking skills. What it means is you're making a contract with the Guru with, as you instruct me, so I will follow. Another question we frequently get is, why do people fan the Guru Granth Sahib? In the old days, if you put yourself back into kind of 15th, 16th century India, there were a lot of invaders. And they happened to come from outside religions. Most of them tended to be Muslim. And they made some rules and restrictions about native Indians. One of the things is they couldn't ride a horse. They couldn't carry a sword. They couldn't wear a turban. And they couldn't have any thrones of authority. So our sixth Guru told all of them, we're going to do all of them. So that's why we have a sword. That's why we have a turban. You'll see us on horses, but now they take the forms of Ford, Dodge, etc. And that's why we also have a fan, which usually is made out of yak hair. Sometimes it can be made out of peacock feathers. These are made of synthetics, right? And it's typically used to fan the Guru Granth Sahib as a throne of authority. Okay, another question people ask is, why do women and men sit separate? As you know, we have floor seating. Floor seating is good, and both can be treacherous on your hamstrings and your legs and your back. But the reason why is it simply has to do with comfort. As you can see, it gets a little bit tight. You tend to be more comfortable when you're around someone of your own gender. If you go to some gurdwaras in India, you will see mixed seating. There's nothing wrong with mixed seating. It just comes down to comfort level. The other thing is, why do we sing? Kirtan in singing is an important part of our tradition. And the most important thing of the singing is not the music. It's not the tune. The most important part about the singing is the knowledge. If everyone read the words, maybe you all learned something. In the old days, people couldn't read and write, so music was a very easy form to communicate. Other thing people ask is, what do you chant? We have something called the Guru Mantra, and the Guru Mantra is called Waheguru. It's basically a name for God, but it's also a mind tool. And the mind tool, and we're going to work through it, and we're going to practice it today, is called Waheguru. And it basically, Guru means teacher. And for the educators here it's not so much as a teacher as it's supposed to be an enlightener. A teacher is supposed to take you out of darkness and bring you into light. That's what it means to be a guru. And what we have to do is, once we come into that light, once we come into that knowledge, the knowledge is a connection to Nam, which I'll talk about. What happens is that is basically the thing that's amazing. Now, why do we all sit down and eat together? Why is it considered very rude if you don't eat? In Indian culture, if you don't eat, you got big trouble, right? The reason why it's so important to eat together is, in previous times, people of different castes, they didn't actually sit together. In high school, if you're part of a different clique, you don't sit together, right? Sitting together is the sign of camaraderie. I think sometimes if we look at Republicans or Democrats, or we look at Jews and Muslims, if we look at Hindus and Sikhs, if we look at any kind of people, if they just sat together, ate a meal together, the one thing that you will find is the differences aren't so different, and the things that they share in common are probably greater than any differences. So just to kind of give you a quick highlight, I talked a little bit about it before, but Sikhs have been in the United States for over 120 years. The Sikh religion was founded with the birth of Guru Nanak Dev Ji in the 15th century, in the 1400s, and it came to fruition in 1699. It's the fifth largest religion in the world. There are about 700,000 to about 1 million Sikhs. One of the things that we're fighting for is to have Sikhs counted in census data. They've got it in Canada. They don't necessarily have it in the UK, but we can't really tell how many Sikhs there are because we're not counted. And if they don't count you, then we don't count. So for anyone who's a local public official, if you could make that happen one day, we'd appreciate it. Okay? It's the fifth largest religion in the world, so if you go through the big ones, you basically have Christianity in all its various forms, Islam, you have Hinduism, you probably have Buddhism or Judaism, and then you have Sikhism. So we're right up there amongst the major religions, even though we might be an afterthought for some folks. Just to kind of give us a timeline, and the timeline here is important. Columbus basically got here in 1492. Guru Nanak Dev Ji born in 1469. Guru Gobind Singh our 10th Guru made the Khalsa. It formed the religion, and essentially, same time George Washington was born. In a lot of ways, the Sikh timeline is very parallel to an American timeline. And as you get to learn what a Sikh believes, you'll find it's very democratic. It doesn't believe in a hierarchy. There's no caste system. It's very democratic, and it believes in a lot of the same views of enlightenment that were thought of at the founding of this nation. The Sikh concept of God is Sikh believes in one God. We have 10 gurus, 10 teachers who taught the religion over a 200 to 300 period of time. Their teachings, along with other people's teachings, are kept in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is our holy book. And we have an initiation ceremony. It's different than a baptism. You choose when you want to be a Khalsa. Khalsa means that you become an army of the pure. That means you're willing to fight for your religion as well as other people's religion, for their right to exist. And it's important that a Sikh learn three important things. They learn how to meditate, which we call Simran, which is the process or the journey to meet God. The second thing is they follow Gurbani, which are the teachings of the Gurus. And the third thing is that they actually live a good life. And this tends to be the hardest part, because you can meditate, you can read scripture, but if you're lying, you're cheating, you're stealing, and your ethical behavior hasn't changed, then what's the point of it? Probably one of the biggest lessons that the Guru Granth Sahib talks about is the hypocrisy of religious people. And it calls them out pretty significantly, because one of the things, and it's true today as it has ever been before, is one thing that irritates people more than anything else is when religious people tend to be hypocrites. And one thing we have to realize is if all of us believe in God, we have to start working on the same team, not against each other. So what is the Sikh concept of God? Sikhs believe in one creator. And this is the most important thing. This one creator, this formless creator, created all form through something called Nam. Nam is the sound of God's voice. When we hear this Nam, you can learn how to connect back to God. And through the practice of meditation, part of your journey is to learn how to meet God. One of the biggest fallacies that Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the first Guru, talked about was that if heaven exists, you should be able to do it while you're alive. You don't have to wait till you're dead. Because the opportunity to do it right begins now. It's not found at a later date. So the purpose of everyone's life, the purpose of a Sikh's life, somebody who wants to learn how to meet God, is to meet God. You have to do it now. God is Nirankar. That means he is without shape, color, or form. God provides life inside and outside the creation. That means he lives inside of us and outside of us. God is not human. That means there's no gender, right? There's no big man in the sky. There's no someone floating around there. God is the divinity that's both inside of us and outside of us. How do you meet God? You learn to meet God through your mind. Who sees it? Your mind sees it. And this is kind of an important concept, because I don't think some people always understand what the mind is. The brain is an organ. The brain is physical. I can touch it, I can squish it, I can go ahead and activate it. But the mind is invisible. And for the mind to go ahead and experience something, it can only experience the visible. The mind is one of those things that sees a visible world through its physical faculties, but it also can see an invisible world when it learns how to close off those physical faculties. And that's one of the duties of a Sikh, is to go ahead and do it. Sikhism is not about religion. It's about the journey of the mind. The mind is called a Sikh, and the duty of a Sikh is to ultimately find truth. So what separates our thoughts from truth? Okay, I'm going to run everyone through an exercise, so I think everyone can see the screens, yes? Okay. Can everyone see the screens? Okay. How many sticks, this is an illustration of sticks. How many sticks do you guys see? 3. How many sticks do you see? 4, very good. Okay, how many sticks do you see? Can anyone tell me? Okay, how many people say 3? Raise your hand. How many people say 4? How many people say both? What is the problem here? Depends on how you see things. where you see things from. If you look from the right, you see 3. If you look from the left, you see 4. It's an illusion, but it's truth for the other person on the other side. And one of the things that a sikh has to do is a sikh has to raise their mind above Maya. And Maya is the illusion that our thoughts create. How many times have you had a situation where someone wanted to do something good for you and you thought it was something bad? I'll give you a simple thing. My gas tank's open, okay? I'm driving down the road and someone's yelling at me, hey, 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 hey. I'm like, wow. I'm like, let me get out of here. Somebody's going ahead and losing their mind and they're just yelling at me. Ever happened to you? Why? Because you let your thoughts and your fears get the better end of you. Sometimes what happens is when we see people that are different, when we see things that are different, we get overcome by what? Fear. It shocks us. It's one of those things that makes us uncomfortable. What makes us uncomfortable? It's our thoughts. That person has God in them. You have God in them. Who has made the discomfort? It's your mind by taking thoughts. And Maya is the source of all your thoughts. And what we talked about is Nam. And Nam, being the creative force of the universe, is the one thing that when our mind connects to Nam, we no longer are prejudiced. We no longer see things from our perspective, but we see things from God's perspective. And what happens is truth is revealed. And this is a very powerful statement because truth can only be revealed when you learn to sit with God. And part of what Sri Guru Granth Sahib teaches us is how to make the mind sit with God. So, just to kind of walk through what's in Sri Guru Granth Sahib. So this is our NPR PBS deep dive version of Sri Guru Granth Sahib. So usually I always stop the lecture around there. We go through a little bit of things. We might do a little meditation. But the reason why we wanted to take more time during this period is because one thing I've found as I've talked to different groups who have come to learn about Sikhism is they go, now we want to learn what's actually in it. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through it. So the first thing was we talked about is it first teaches the mind how to go ahead and meet God versus Nam. There are techniques on how to meet God. It actually shows you what to do to go ahead and meet God. And so these are revealed. So the proof is in the pudding. So if you don't do the techniques, then you can't actually see it. And then you'll know it, right? And it explains how you can hear the Nam. If you do it, you'll be able to hear it. All it does is take practice, right? It explains what Maya is. It explains our thoughts. So there are no illustrations there, but Maya is very simply just the illusion of our thoughts, just simply through that simple exercise of 3 sticks, 4 sticks. Sri Guru Granth Sahib explains how God resides in the body, in the mind. It actually talks about how the soul is intertwined into the physical part of the body, how it's actually applied. It's actually sewn. The soul is sewn and plied into the physical body via the pran. The pran is the life breath. And how when that life breath goes away, how the soul is released, but the soul neither needs liberation, nor does the soul need to be cleansed, nor does it need to be fed, because it's no different than God. But the mind is actually making the journey through the cycle of life and death. It explains what sin is. And that sin, when you have a thought outside of Nam, is sin. And that when you connect to Nam and you merge into it, you can actually erase sin. It's not reliant on anyone else. It explains the concept of karma. And karma is just not your actions. And this is a false, unfortunately, a simplified view of what karma is. Karmas are created by your thoughts, and then it's created by the actual consequences of your action. So you can have a thought to do something good, but then you actually have to think through the consequences of that action, and your karma is created that way. For a lot of people, karma is a jail. It's a jail because they said, how can you break it? So the Guru Granth Sahib explains that when you merge into Nam, you actually break the cycle of karma. Okay? It explains the difference between religion and ritual. If somebody comes into the Gurdwara, they bow their head, and they go ahead and sit down, but they're thinking about work. Is it religion or ritual? It's ritual. But when they go ahead and sit and they say, this is my contract with my teacher, I'm going to listen today, and they remind themselves of the purpose of why they're sitting there, is it religion or ritual? It's religion. The reason why is because of their dhyan, their focus. I want to ask you a question. Do you think people are more focused today or they were 10 years ago? 10 years ago or today? How about 20 years ago? What was your focus like? Why? Because of something called dhyan. And Guru Granth Sahib teaches us that religion is lost the moment we lose our focus. And the way you regain your focus back is through learning how to meditate. Because all worship is done with the mind. It's not done with the body. Okay? It also goes ahead and places variable check markers on if you can hear Nam, if you can see God, if you've actually achieved it or you're delusional. It explains what the delusions are and explains what the realities are. It also creates a culture of giving rather than taking. One thing is, wherever Sikhs go, I'm constantly surprised, no matter what country I go to, I go, wow, Sikhs are always about sharing. They're always giving. They're always contributing. They're always looking for the top jobs. They're not about taking or taking advantage of people. The reason why? Because Sri Guru Granth Sahib lays out a prescription for how to create a culture of giving rather than taking. Sri Guru Granth Sahib explains that we are one human race. We are not white, we're not black, we're not yellow, we're not red, we're not brown. We all have the same creator. Our body might be different, but we are all one. Gender doesn't matter. Religion doesn't matter. Ethnicity doesn't matter. Culture doesn't matter. Language doesn't matter. What matters is truth. Do you want to know who you are, or do you want to lie to yourself? The hardest thing to do in the world is to love yourself. Sri Guru Granth Sahib gives the prescription of how to know who you are and how to love yourself. The greatness of God comes from our smallness. We are small and insignificant. Why is God so great? Because he gives us an opportunity. God gives us the opportunity to meet God. The greatness of God comes from the opportunity to meet God. We're small and insignificant, but still such a great creator gives us this opportunity. For a Sikh, salvation doesn't come from a person and it doesn't come from a religion. It comes from your effort. Are you willing to do the hard work prescribed by your guru in order to achieve the things that you need to? It's not found by walking into the Gurdwara and not paying attention. It's found by actually doing something about it. And in the Guru Granth Sahib, it gives a lot of real-world examples. It gives examples of farmers. It gives examples about marriage. It gives examples about husbands and wives. It gives so many different examples that are real, that they're very kind of tangible in our society of how we function in an everyday world. So frequently, the next question that comes up is, well, where does science and the Guru Granth Sahib come together? I really want to make this distinction because I think too often, religious terms are different than scientific terms. They're not on the same basis. But what's important to understand is that science is really good at figuring out the physical, and spirituality's job is to figure out the invisible. And one of the things that Sri Guru Granth Sahib teaches us is about the invisible. In the Guru Granth Sahib, there are concepts that are similar to science, but they go through invisible ways. For example, it talks about evolution. It says from one being we evolved into different other beings. And there are so many different beings, and from one thing we just kept on evolving with different shape, colors, and forms. It talks about life on other planets. It says there is a name for God wherever you go. Even if you go to a different planet, there's a name for God there. People know about their creator. It believes that the creation started with one sound. Now, this sound can still be heard. What travels back in time is not the body, but it's the mind. And the mind has to learn to listen to this sound, and that sound of Nam is the sound of creation. It believes one day everything will come to an end and it will regenerate itself. It says that the universe is constantly expanding, and one day it will collapse on itself and it will be brought right back into the creator. Similar to the Big Bang, or the creation part is similar to the Big Bang, the destruction part is similar to the Big Crunch. Gravity is discussed. It talks about the gravity and orbit of things. The word is called taval. I can give you a quote for all of these things, but they talk about subspace, they talk about gravity on this earth, and they talk about subspace. The word for that is taval. The idea of string theory is discussed. It believes that everything is held on one constant string. There's one thing that unifies the creation. And I think it's important to know, there's a time where all of a sudden spiritual people feel they have to reject science. Religious people feel that science is threatening them. That's not the case. Scientists have a job. Spiritual people have a job. Our job is not to connect with sin. Science's job is to explain the visible universe. Don't confuse the two. You do your job, let science do its job. Okay? In the Guru Granth Sahib, you will be punished if you have forced conversion. You are not allowed to force anyone to do anything. You can educate, you can ask, you can request. But if you force someone to take on religion, if you force someone to go ahead and perform some sort of religious service, you will be punished. It discusses what a religious leader should do, and it discussed all different religions of its time. I think there's some idea that somehow we were all isolated from each other, not knowing that basically India, China, Europe, Africa, they were all very integrated with trade for thousands and thousands of years. And people were familiar with religions, they were familiar with ideas. People weren't as isolated as we think they were, simply because we can travel and see things on Instagram now of everyone going everywhere. But the reality is people were integrated, they were educated. At that time, India probably brought close to 1/4 or 1/5 of the world's GDP. They had 1/3 to 1/4 of the world's population. That's just India. It doesn't include the economy of China. In the time of Sikhism, obviously there was the Black Plague that was going on in Europe, and then all of a sudden Europe didn't have the population that, let's say, Africa, India, or China had, and they tended to be the economic strongholds. Sri Guru Granth Sahib gives examples of people who had achieved high spiritual levels and then failed because they failed to behave appropriately or ethically. It explains the different congregations you can keep. You can either keep the congregation of someone who doesn't believe in God. In that case, you've kind of sown, the end of your kind of spiritual existence for that moment. Or you can go ahead and talk to people who actually want to achieve and meet God. It also explains how to recognize a real teacher from a fake teacher. It explains why family life is important. For a Sikh doesn't live in my old joke is I know everyone wants to be monastic and they want to isolate themselves after a good meditation camp, but I go, if you go to the forest, the thing we always forget are mosquitoes, right? Lots and lots of mosquitoes. So you can visualize yourself going ahead and having a great meditation experience isolated, but everyone forgets about how are you going to eat? You know, is there going to be air conditioning? Is there going to be heating? Are there going to be bugs there? Right? Sri Guru Granth Sahib explains that Scripture is not for prayer. Scripture is for knowledge. We read, we go ahead and read Guru Granth Sahib. We read different sections of it over again for instruction, not as a form of ritual. It also teaches us that when you read Scripture for knowledge, knowledge is important, but what trumps knowledge and education is actually experience. So if you don't get to the goal, but you know about the goal, you've been educated on the goal, that doesn't count for anything. It also teaches us what to pray for. It says don't ask for anything in this world, because all those things will end up by just giving you pain and sorrow. It says ask for Nam, because it's the only thing that will connect you to the Creator. And finally, and most importantly, it teaches you not to be afraid of what other people think about you. You know, for everyone who tied a turban today or didn't or just came, it's very brave. Sometimes you think, well, what will other people say? Right? How will they criticize me? You know? And I think it's very important that part of our job, Sikhs, all of us, whether we're Indian, not Indian, whether we're from this culture, not from this culture, is that if you look around, this is me talking to my brethren over here, look how wonderful, look how much people love you here. Would you be as open to going to a church? Would you be as open to going to a synagogue? Would you be as open as going to a mosque? Thank you for coming, but I have to ask my fellow Sikhs over here, is would you be this open? Dialogue is very important in Sikhism, and the dialogue begins with spirituality. Another big thing for basically Indians in general is purity. Everyone kept on talking about what does it mean to be pure? What does it mean to be pure? And Sri Guru Granth Sahib explains purity is not found through sexual celibacy. Sex doesn't have anything with being pure. Lust has something to do with keeping the mind pure, but physical sex has nothing to do with going ahead and keeping yourself pure. Pilgrimages do not make you pure. You can go to as many temples as you want. You can go to as many religious institutions as you want. So Guru Granth Sahib says, that doesn't make you pure. Fasting, it doesn't make you pure. At the end of the day, the food is for the body. It's not meant for the mind. When you punish your body, when people purposefully punish their body in a way to attempt to go ahead and somehow get closer to God, that doesn't make you pure either. Ritual bathing. People have all different ways that they actually bathe themselves, thinking that that makes them pure. That doesn't make you pure. Foreskin removal. For Sikhs, there's no covenant for God by removing the foreskin. That doesn't make someone pure. Women on their menstrual cycle. It's actually mentioned in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. It says, women on their menstrual cycle, they're still pure. The people who say they can't perform religious duties because they're on their menstrual cycle, because those people are impure. Okay? Food. Food is only impure when you forget God. Making sacrifices, doing ritual. Food doesn't go ahead and become pure that way. Having specialized kitchens where certain prayers are done, priests get blessed, that doesn't make it pure. Because you have a job or a position at the temple, at the mosque, at the church, that doesn't make you pure. And when you wear religious robes, that doesn't make you pure. Just because I have a turban on and I have, all the identifying things of a Sikh, if my mind is not pure, I am not pure. The outside things do not make me pure. And Sikhism focuses on the inside. It doesn't focus on the outside. And Sri Guru Granth Sahib explains explicitly, religious people have made religion into a business, and it's the necessity for people who believe in God to start standing up for what is right. One of the biggest things that hurt Guru Nanak Dev Ji when he talked about religion is he goes, it's all about making money. The purpose of religion is not to profit off the congregation, not to profit off their faith. The purpose of religion is to take people and make them happy, to make them find things spiritually and give their mind peace. And that's what Sri Guru Granth Sahib teaches. Where does the nexus between the mind and Nam happen? It happens inside of ourselves. And so I'm going to go, if it's okay with you, we have about a few minutes left, and I'm just going to go through how to do meditation. And by the way, the mantra doesn't matter. We're all going to use Waheguru because that's our Gur mantra. Man means mind, Thra means tool. But all it simply is a mind tool to take all the billions of thoughts that you have and reduce it out to 0 thoughts. And what I want you to do is learn how to experience the mind. That's the first stage. And as you practice, if you keep on practicing, hopefully you'll experience Nam one day. The mantra doesn't matter. If you want to say Yahweh, you want to say Elohim, you want to say Hallelujah, you want to say Allahu, you want to say Ram, you want to say whatever name you want. In your private practice, that's okay. But we're all going to say, Why Guru? Can everyone say it with me? Why Guru? Why just Guru? So just to kind of give you an idea, just to remind you again, when I was a kid, most people root for the Pistons or the Bulls here? So in the 90s, when I was a kid, when my dad used to take me once a year, we got to go see a Bulls game. And when they saw Michael Jordan do something amazing, in Chicago Stadium, which was a very small stadium, it's not like the United Stadium, in Chicago Stadium, there would be a collective, and then all of a sudden there would be an explosion of sound. And in the same way, that is actually, Guru, right? We don't actually breathe in when we say it, but we just say, Why Guru? We do it in 2 syllables. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is I want to keep your eyes closed and your body still. We're going to do it for about 1 minute, and we're all going to just say it like we've been saying it. And I just want you to focus on the sound of your voice. Don't imagine anything. Don't say anything. I'll tell you when the minute's done. We're all just going to do it together. Okay? Why Guru? Why Guru? Why Guru? Why Guru? Why Guru? Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. So everyone did that with your tongue, basically in your mouth, and you listened with your ears. So now I want everyone to do it as a whisper. So a whisper is basically something, in an Indian culture we talk really loud, so we don't know what whispers are, but it means only the person next to you can hear it. No one else should be able to hear it. So we're just going to whisper it. We're going to keep our eyes closed, our body still. We're just going to do it for a minute, and we're going to say, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ka Fateh. How's everyone feel? Good? See, meditation's nice, right? Okay. Now what I want you to do, I want you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, close your eyes, take a deep breath. Exhale. In the loudest voice you can possibly do it, I want you to do it in your mind. And I just want you to scream it in your mind as loud as you can do it. So when we did it the first time, who was speaking? Our mouth was speaking, yes? Who was listening? Our ears. When we did it the third time, who was speaking? Who was speaking? Your mind. And who was listening? The next stage will be how to listen to God's voice, and then finally how to see God with your mind. To follow Guru Granth Sahib doesn't mean you have to be a Sikh. Everyone can keep their own religion. Whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Buddhist, it doesn't matter what your religion is. everyone has a mind, everyone has God in them, and it's important that you learn how to make that connection. Just as your mind connects with thoughts, so your mind should connect with God. But it's not imagination, it has to be reality. And what Sri Guru Granth Sahib teaches us is how to connect with that reality. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.